Okay, maybe you can just sort of give us a high-level overview of some of the report's conclusions. I know that the Kingsway and the downtown sites were both identified as viable, although one was identified as superior to the other. Can you just give me an idea of the process and what went into that decision?
Yes, I'll describe generally the process. The process was approved by Council in March when we sent a report describing the business case for a new arena event center. At that time, Council elected to proceed with developing a site evaluation, and we gave them a description of how that process would unfold. It included some criteria. So since the large projects portfolio has come into my hands, we've set up a steering committee of senior staff. That includes myself. It includes Catherine Matheson, our General Manager of Community Development, Tony Cicuti, General Manager of Infrastructure and Growth, Ed Stankwich, our Chief Financial Officer, Eliza Bennett as our Director of Communications and Community Engagement. And Ron and Ian have been participating both on the steering committee and as our point people for discussions with various stakeholders who are involved in the 4 streams of work underway to evaluate all 4 large projects approved by Council. So with respect to the event center, in March, Council said we approved this business case. We agree that it should proceed to site evaluation, go and evaluate sites. And so the job was to identify potential sites. There were quite a few that were candidates. Those were filtered. Ron, with Ron Bedelka's help from PwC, led this work. We had a site evaluation committee comprising Ron Henderson, Ian Wood, Ron Bedelka, Keith Forrester, Jason Farragon, and other staff that were consulted as required for their subject matter expertise. We also used third-party experts to do specific technical analysis like traffic studies, soil testing, and other assessments related to economic impacts to assess the viability of the sites as a host for an arena event center. So that information has been compiled over the last 3 months. There's been an intense amount of work. It was assessed by that site evaluation committee, and advice was presented to the steering committee. The steering committee considered the advice, asked questions of these 2 gentlemen, and then proceeded to make advice available for Council in the form of the report. That will be up for discussion on June 27th.
One thing I noticed in the evaluation criteria is that the Kingsway ended up with a 4 in terms of ease of development. Can you give me an idea of how that number was reached?
I'll ask Mr. Henderson to describe the evaluation process in that context.
Yeah. So I can get you a copy of the questions that were asked that the site evaluation team used. So there were essentially 8. There were 8 criteria, and within each criteria, the evaluation team asked. There was about 3-4 questions per criteria that we went through and compared each site to each other. So we were working with 4 shortlisted sites. So it was really a matter for each question of comparing site A to site B to site C to site D to try to come up with a kind of a preference. There's some subjectivity involved, I will admit that right up front, but at the end of the day it really came down to professional and judgment and experience from a whole host of senior city staff. So the one you just mentioned was complementary benefits?
Ease of development.
Oh, sorry, ease of development. So just I'll quickly go through them. Is a site well serviced and can existing services handle the adding requirement of an arena? So just on that one, just off the top of my head, you know, the downtown certainly has existing infrastructure in place. It has power, it has sewer, it has water, it has roads, it has all the infrastructure in place that exist. Whereas the greenfield sites, South End sites, Kingsway, are all services that need to be brought to the site. So that's probably why, just right, so you can just kind of give you an idea how the evaluation team was thinking. And I'm trying to paraphrase. These are discussions that happened weeks ago. So, can development move quickly and avoid a prolonged due diligence or approval process? The Kingsway site needs a rezoning. The downtown site does not. So you can see it's just going to be a little bit more of an effort to begin construction on the Kingsway in that regard. Are there site development issues that would extend the process? And then finally, are there significant geotechnical, environmental issues with the site specific to building an arena? So, and once again, that was kind of, I mean, the Kingsway would require some kind of environmental assessment. It's got, even though we don't really build upon it too much. It's next to the landfill, so there's some minor issues to do with that, where the downtown is a little bit more a cleaner site in terms of environmental issues. So just on that category, I'm just giving you a little bit of a high-level rendition of kind of how we chatted about it as a team to come up with the scoring that we did.
Now, how did the downtown rank in terms of ease of development? Will you not have to purchase properties and do some?
We do. So I can tell you that for all the affected sites, South End site, Kingsway, downtown, we were successful in negotiating an option to purchase agreement for all the businesses and land that we need to begin construction. So in terms of that process, we've been successful. The whole idea behind that was, obviously, we didn't want our council to make a decision and find out that the landowner wanted, adds a zero to his asking price kind of thing. So we wanted to lock in prices and so forth. So when council did make their decision, we were able to act upon those option to purchase and be able to begin construction in a reasonable time frame. So to answer your we've been able to successfully negotiate that.
But how many properties would you have to acquire?
So are you speaking specifically to the downtown? So you know which site we're talking about in the downtown?
It would be Minto, that area there?
Yeah, so there's the block right there,
Mm-hmm.
kind of looking right at it. It's the Shaughnessy Minto block that contains Golden Grain, Wacky Wings, Dalron's parking lot, Alexandria's, right to Van Horn. So that entire block is the preferred downtown site. So in terms of option to purchase agreements, we do have 3, and those are the 3 we need to begin construction.
Now, what about parking? I know that was one of the highest priorities that council had put on the site selection. What's the parking situation downtown?
Parking is something that, as we note in our report to council, has a perceived problem associated with it when you talk about a downtown location. From a technical perspective, regarding the number of spaces you need, there is enough parking downtown. The challenge, I think, is the perception and perhaps the reality for some that it's not conveniently located. So among the analysis that's been done, there's been a lot of judgment made, as Mr. Henderson noted. There's also anticipation about what the consequence of a location choice would be for, as we were discussing earlier, the complementary benefit or the consequence to the decision for others looking to make investments. And downtown is a place where there has been interest expressed by the private sector in developing parking solutions. So we anticipate that might develop further. But we have enough parking downtown. The challenge with the downtown site for council's consideration is whether that's sufficient from a convenience perspective and experience perspective. If not, then if it's a downtown site that council would like to proceed with, the private sector may come with solutions for more convenient parking solutions.
I noticed in the report it said the possibility of a structured parking garage. Is that something the city would undertake, or do you think perhaps that the private sector would be interested in that?
Right now, we don't anticipate the city participating in a structured parking solution. The private sector, as I said, as Mr. Henderson has described in updates to our committee, Mr. Bedelka has been corresponding with companies that have been expressing or inquiring about those types of matters. The potential for a structured parking solution downtown by a private sector company is an option. And then I think it depends on how things unfold.
The rezoning, I noticed in the report it said it would add about a year to the process. Is that normally how long a rezoning takes?
I think I said up to a year, and typically 6 months, 9 months, it can be a year. It depends, is unfortunately the answer. It is another process that involves technical judgment and professional opinion. So it can be as little as 6 months, but that's a detail that really is very unique to the property that you're talking about.
Yeah. There's also a potential for appeal in a rezoning process. So there's no sense in saying, optimistically speaking, it can be accomplished in such and such a time, when the potential is there that it could be drawn out further. So we're trying to put realistic numbers forward.
Maybe we can talk a bit about the downtown site. Now, you said it's the Minto block, that sort of block right over there. Can you just describe the physical structure of how the arena would work? I assume the existing arena would stay where it is during construction?
With our report, what we anticipate is that there will be some further work done, subject to council's decisions, about what we would use the existing arena property for following the decision to proceed with construction of a new arena. So the footprint of the new arena would be subject to a design-build process and specifications that we've been developing. So I can imagine that there would be some retail activity along the ground floor at that grade with the street to facilitate some activity. And then there would be, of course, a 5,800-seat bowl that would be serving the events and other sporting activities that would go on at the arena. So the physical design of the building will be informed by the RFP process that we would undertake following decisions on the 27th.
When they built the beer store here downtown and also the Laurentian School of Architecture, they ran into issues. It was pretty wet. The budget was higher than expected. Was that, is there any concerns at all about digging up downtown? For some reason they decided to build downtown Sudbury on a pretty wet area.
Soil conditions downtown, well, soil conditions throughout the city, but certainly soil conditions downtown were considered, and we used technical experts to give us opinions about that. The experience, particularly of the School of Architecture, informed our estimates both of time and costs associated with a development like this. And so I'll ask Ron to describe any other information in the context of the site evaluation process that informed their judgment about the soil conditions.
Well, the only thing I'll add is we also reached out to the Meridian Center in St. Catharines, who had micropile. They had poor soils there as well, so they had to micropile that arena. So we got the piling configuration for the Meridian Center. Basically use that configuration because the arena size is going to be very similar to ours. Took the known costs from the School of Architecture for micropiling. Micropiling were able to come up with the estimate that we did.
It's important to stress, again, we've mentioned this a couple times, there's some judgment involved in putting this information together and making choices based on technical experience and experts that we consulted for this purpose. As we go through the RFP process and as more preparatory work by those firms that will submit bids is undertaken, we'll be able to know more specific information about what the final configuration of pilings or final soil condition details look like as it relates to both construction schedule and cost. But we feel our estimates are reasonable for council to make a decision about where they think the location should be.
Okay.
Just a few more minutes, guys.
Actually, I had one question and I've lost it now. Oh, there's been a perception out there that maybe the process isn't skewed toward downtown. Do you think that the report and the information in it will satisfy the public that this is a fair process?
I'm comfortable this was a fair process. I described briefly when we started our conversation about the governance relationships that we've set up to manage all 4 project streams. This was a process that council directed each step of the way. We, as a steering committee of senior staff, understand the goals for the community. This is a project, all 4 projects are aligned closely with council's strategic plan. We are looking at what is good for the community as a whole. And a strong community has a strong downtown. That's been established not just by our own previous reports to council. You look at the strategic planning session council had in 2015, for example. I think you reported at the time that there was discussion about the value of having a strong downtown in the context of a growing and healthy community. Those are features that are regularly part of these kinds of discussions. But we didn't just look at what's good for the downtown. We looked at what's good for the community, and with respect to the sites we evaluated the potential economic impacts based on those sites. And so Mr. Wood's staff did some analysis. Mr. Bedelka's experience certainly came into the conversation, and those details together produced the results we see. It's important to stress that while the downtown site is the highest ranked site, and for reasons that are consistent with official plan policy positions and downtown master plan positions, it's a reasonable recommendation for council to consider. The Kingsway site is a viable choice as well, and our report clearly says that.
The Kingsway site has more risk. Can you give me an idea of why it's a riskier location to develop? Is that because you're depending on the private sector to decide to sort of develop there, whereas downtown it seems more of a natural fit, or just why is it more risky on the Kingsway?
I'll describe generally, and I'll ask Mr. Henderson or Mr. Wood from an economic development perspective to offer any other perspectives. From the point of view of the steering committee's assessment of the analysis that we saw, you anticipate the vision that's been described for the Kingsway site depends on decisions that have not yet fully been taken. So you anticipate development to occur, and it may be reasonable to anticipate, but it hasn't happened yet. Whereas with the downtown site, you have complementary businesses in place. You have infrastructure ready for use. And so from that point of view, there is greater risk associated with the Kingsway site. Gentlemen, anything to offer by way of further
Well,
comment?
the only thing I'll add is we, part of this analysis was to also try to learn from other cities that have built event centers in the last 20 years and what the benefit and economic impact to those cities have been. And I think it's pretty fair to say and safe to say that most cities have built their event centers in their downtowns and have seen immediate benefit from that, and we're able to basically discover that and find that evidence. And unfortunately, it was difficult to find good examples of cities that have built on greenfield sites that were happy with it. I mean, I think of Ottawa and Medicine Hat and Windsor, and it's not to say it can happen here. It's just saying it was very difficult to find evidence of a city that built on a greenfield site that it worked out for them in terms of the economic impact that they were hoping would occur.
That's our time, guys. Do you have one last question? Or?
No, that's great.
All right.